Welcome guys, I'm Gio here, hope you're having a great day, and this is a final video in a series about RxJS. This will be a little more practical and we're gonna tie all things together that we've covered so far and get some practical experience with RxJS. We have a little example here, and this is the table of games, and we have to build this table. We have API for that, and this API responds to various filters. We can filter by studio, some search string. We can differentiate between released and not released games. And our goal in this video is to make this page alive, display the list of games, make this table reactive, and also make sure that code that we write is clean and readable, and try to use different observables and see how RxJS can be used in practice. Also, we're not going to be using any frameworks or anything, just a simple JavaScript to only concentrate on the library. Let's jump into the code. And first thing I want to do before touching on any filters, here I just want to display the list of games without any filtering. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the observable for that. I'm going to create the observable and call it games. And this observable will be based on HTTP request. And for that, we're going to be using AJAX call. So we can write AJAX get JSON, and now I'll specify the URL of custom API that I've created for this example, and it's running on localhost. So this is our games observable, and right now it's not doing anything until we subscribe to it. So first thing I suggest is that let's just subscribe to it and see how the contents of the games look. I've just taken v for value for now. So let's check this. Let's refresh the page, and this is our result. We have made the request, and yeah, this is how games look. We have ID, we have released flag, we have studio, and title of the game. Now we have games defined, and the next step, without any filtering or anything, is to just display them, display these games in the table. And this is our table. So right now I'm going to do just that. Because we aren't using any framework or any library that will handle the rendering part, we have to do this manually. So what I would suggest is that we need to subscribe to games, and once we get the games, or when they will change in the future, we take the list of games and we just build the HTML string that will be necessary to be inserted here in this table. So let's do just that. I'm gonna call, instead of v, I'm gonna call this more appropriate name, and this is games list. And here we are going to generate this new content to set inside the table to make it look like the table. So let's just create table content, and we will generate this content, and eventually here in the end we are going to set this as the body for this table. So let's write that. Here we have this table, this element specifically, table body, and in the end we will just set the table content. So this is the initial content, which is empty right now, and eventually we are going to set this, and here we are going to generate this necessary content. And that way we will be able to display the games inside the table. So let's do that. And we need to take games list and take every element. We can use for each. And this is game. And now for each game, we need to create a table row for that. So we build this for row. Now inside we need to build some cells for the table and put the game info there. So first one would be the name. The next thing will be whether it is released or not. So like we did with title, it will be exactly the same. But since this is the Boolean flag, we want to display yes, no. So this is what we have. If it is released, we are displaying yes. If it is not, then we just display no. And the last thing we want to add into this table is the studio, and it will be exactly the same like we did with title. And now I think everything is ready, and we can just check the results. And yes, it is working. We have the list of games in the table here. It's working, it's nice. If games change, this will be updated, of course, because we have defined games as observables and we have the rendering logic here. This part is not very exciting. It's just trying to output the data here in our page. And again, if we have used some frameworks or some libraries, this will be handled for us, so we don't have to manually write this. Since this part is already there, we don't have to touch anything. Now we can move on to the filters. We need to extend this so the content here is reactive to that. Right now, these filters are just there and they aren't doing anything. Let's work on that next. The first filter I want to deal with is the search string. Because we are working with observables, it's easy to represent the search string as observable. So first of all, what I want to do is just define this variable called search input that will refer to this search input. So I will do this. The next step I want to perform is to represent the changes in the search input here as observable. So what I want to do is when user types in something, I want to receive these updates as observable. And from there on, I will chain this with games. We already know how to do that. We have covered this in previous videos. There is a special function in RxJS called fromEvent. And fromEvent will generate observable based on events. So let's do just that. I'm gonna call this search and it will be observable and it will be created with fromEvent, and this is the element that we are working with, search input. It refers to our search input, and the event I'm going to handle is input, and this is when user is typing inside the control. I want to base my observable on that. Now this is not enough because this here will generate event objects, but I don't need the whole event object. I just want the text that is typed here. To make sense all of this, let's first subscribe to search and see how this looks like. Refresh the page, and now if I start typing here, as you see, I'm receiving this input event, but I'm not interested in this event. What I want is the actual text that is here, the actual text that user is typing. That's what this observable should represent. So we have to transform this, and for that we can use map operator. As you see, I have already this imports here for convenience. And now we can use map, take this event, and on this event there is target, and then there is value. And right now, if we check this, and I start typing there, as you see, this is the actual text that user is typing. So if I write Kyo is here, this is what I receive. That's exactly what I want. I want to represent these changes here as observable. Now what I want to do is to somehow chain this observable and this observable together. Now what I want to do is to define games in a way that when search changes, games also change. And we can do that. We can base one observable on another. So what we have to do in this case, instead of just calling this API, we have to take the search and we have to use switch map operator. So what we're going to do is for every change that will happen inside the search box, we want to react to that. So what we will do is we will take this search and we will use a switch map operator. And if you don't know what switch map is, please check the other video. I have explained this in a very detailed. It's very important to understand what this does. What basically we are doing right now is that we are taking the search and using this to generate games. So we are using one observable to generate another. Inside switch map, we will receive the search string. That's why we made this transformation. Search string. And now for every search string that we receive, we want to make request. And that's why we need the switch map. And inside this, when we make request, we want to pass in the search string to our API. And to do that, we can pass in query parameter, and our API understands that, and it is called exactly search string, and pass it this value, whatever we are searching right now. As you see now, games is based on the search, and when search changes, games will change, and when games change, this subscription kicks in, and we will receive the updated table. Now let's check the results. Refresh the page and nothing happens. There is no request. Why is that? Well, that is because initially when we enter the page, there is no interaction with the search box. So user has not typed in anything there yet, and we haven't received any value. That's why this is not going to kick in. And it's not going to generate any values because it is based on search and nothing was searched yet because it's the first load. So to avoid that, we want to have some initial value for our search observable before user types in. That's why we can use start with operator, and we can write this start with, and we are going to start this with the empty string because that's what we initially have. Refresh the page. Let's type in Witcher. And as you see, it is working. We got filtered results. Let's try something else. Let's say Warhammer, and it is there. Let's try another one. And yes, as we see, it is working. It's working fine. And this table is becoming more reactive. Let's observe this search process for now. Let's refresh the page. Initially, when we load the page, we make one request to get this displayed. Let me try to type in something here. Let's type in Witcher. And as you see, for every search string that we have typed in here, we made this request, and this is a waste. We are not interested in this intermediate results. We are only interested in this. So all these other calls that we made are wasting resources, and we need to avoid that. Ideally, what we want to do is allow user to type in something, and after user is finished with the search string, then we want to make only a single request. The problem here is that we don't know when user has stopped typing. Some users might type faster, some users might type slower, but in this case I would suggest to take a 1 second. So what we want to do is, after user types in something, and after user types in last character in the search bar, we will wait for 1 second, and if this is not changed, then we will make request. You can tweak this time depending on your app, but for this example I would just take a 1 second. So what we will do is, when user will start typing, we're not going to make requests, and after user stops, we will wait for 1 second, and then we are going to make the request. This way we will save this unnecessary requests and avoid the waste of resources. So how to do this? It seems tricky to implement, right? We have to set up some timer and also listen to the changes of this input, and then reset this timer if some value comes in within this timer. It seems a bit complicated. Wouldn't it be nice if there was some way to just accomplish that, just what we need? Well, there is, and it is called debounce time. This is the operator from RxJS. And this is going to do exactly what we wanted. So let me just put this here for the search observable and observe the results, and then I'll explain in more details how that works. And as I've said, I will just pass in 1 second, and I'm going to move this here because we want to emit the initial value immediately. Let's check the results. Refresh the page. We got this table. This is our request. Now I will type in something here. And as you see, it is working. And we have got only 2 requests, one for initial, then we've got this after I have typed in something. Now you might argue that 1 second is too much or too little, depending on your situation, but again, there is no best solution here. You just have to take this number and tweak this. Now let's get back to debounce time operator and see how that works. So it's going to look at the source observable, which in this case is user typing in something, and it's going to look at each value. When the value comes, it's going to set up the timer for this given period of time, in this case 1 second, and if nothing else comes within this period, it will emit this value, so we will receive that. Now if something else comes within this time frame, then it's going to reset the timer for that new value and repeat the same process. That is why when user is typing in something in the search box quickly, it is not making all the requests. Now, why did I put this before start with? That is because if I put this here, and now I check the result, refresh the page, and as you see, we have a delay here. These results aren't loaded immediately. It is waiting for 1 second, exactly what I have described. So we don't want this wait to be here. We want to emit this initial value instantly and then apply this operator for these changes, for the actual changes that user is making. That's why I put this here. And this is how the search works. Before we move on to the other things and other filters here, let's take a look at what we have. So we have games observable, we have search observable. Games is based on search. Based on the games, we generate our table content. This subscription doesn't care what games depends on. It only cares about the games. When the games change, we just get this. Next thing I want to handle is this checkbox here. And similarly to search, I want to represent this as the observable. So for this, first I'm going to create variable to refer this released element. And this is, let's call this release input. And it refers to this element here. Based on that, I will generate another observable. And it will be very similar to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this released only. And it will be like this. Okay. We are going to be generating this from event. And event will be the same, but the element will be another. It will be, instead of search input, it will be a release input. And there we are going to apply some operators here, specifically map, because you already know that we are receiving event object here and we are not interested in that. We are interested in the state of the checkbox. So instead of returning just event, we are going to take this. And initially, we want to set this value for the same reason that we set the search. I want this to be false because, well, initially it's not checked. That way, I define the released only observable. Now what we have to do is to somehow connect this observable to this thing here that we have. But how can we do that? The games is already based on search. How we take this as well? How we take this released only observable as well? Well, there is a special function. It is called combine latest, and it is doing exactly what you're thinking that it is doing. it is combining latest values of different observables. And now games will be based on not only search, but also on released only observable. So let's try to combine these two into a single observable. And for that, let's use combine latest. So I'm going to write combine latest. And now we are going to combine search, very easy, and released only. And instead of basing these games on search, we will use this as a source. And right now, games depends on combination of these two. The result of the combine latest is observable. And here we have to tweak the switch map because right now, not only we receive search, but also the flag released only. So here we're receiving array, and we are going to destructure that, and we will have search string, and we will have released only flag. Now we have to make some changes to our request, and we need to pass in released only flag as well. Now technically we are done, and we haven't to change anything else. So let's just check the results first. And as you see, initially it has loaded, it is working. Search is working. And now let's try to use this. And as you see, it is working just fine. Here in the latest request, we see that released only is true, and we only receive the games that are released. Now if we uncheck this, we receive all the games. Let's clear this, and now we can combine them, right? Let's type in this, and we receive this. We have this two items here, and now let's apply this, and it is filtered down. Now let's delete this, and we got all the games. Let's uncheck this, and look at this. How cool is that? All of this, they are working together. And this table is reactive, and these filters are combined, and we didn't have to do much to accomplish that, thanks to RxJS. Let's look at the code again. Here, as you see, we have changed not much. We just defined new observable, modified the games a little bit, but we haven't touched the search, we haven't touched the display part, we haven't touched a lot with the request, and all of this is working together thanks to observables. Everything is chained together. Now let's deal with the last filter, and let's try to filter the games by studio. And as I did with the other inputs, I'm going to create variable to refer this element here, this select. This is studio input, and now again, you already have the idea what I'm going to do. I'm going to generate another observable, and then I'm going to just plug that in here. So let's do this, and I'm going to call this observable just studio, and again, this will be based on the from event function, and the event will be same, this input event when user interacts with the select. And we will just change the studio input. And now we have to make some tweaks because it is going to emit the event and we are interested in actual value. So we are going to be using exactly this line, map operator. We are going to event target, take the event target value. And now we also need some initial value because as with the other observables, initially they are not generating anything because user interaction hasn't happened when the page loads. So initial value in this case will be, of course, start with, I am going to put in all because we want to display all the games from all the studios. So let's apply this now. Applying this is very easy since we already have combine latest, and we just have to add this in the list. And this is it. Now we are combining these three things together, and what remains is that we have to use this value, studio value, and pass it to our API. Again, I'm going to receive this here as a third element from this array. Okay, let's check the result. Once again, refresh the page. We got the result. Now let's change the studio. And it is working fine, as expected. Now let's combine these filters together. Let's take the CA first. Use the released only. It is filtered, unchecked, checked. Now take all. Now take this. Now let's take this again and then filter with Troy. And now released only. And now remove this. And let's add this. Now we receive this again and clear this and all of that. It is working fine. And as you see, we have created very reactive user experience. We have this table. It depends on these search filters and everything is working fine. They work together. Let's look at the code again and summarize everything. So we have 3 standalone observables: search, released only, and studio. They are based on the events of user interacting with specific controls. They have nothing to do with each other. They are independent. They don't care if the others exist. So search is independent, same with released only and studio. And now we have also games, and games is based on these 3 observables. And thanks to this combine latest function, we are taking all these observables and chaining them together, combining, and that way we are defining the games. We combine this and then we just make the request to our API, and this is our games. And finally, we have our display logic. This is when the games change, this subscription kicks in, and the contents will be updated. That's why our table is reactive. Now look at how modular this is. And how are we using composition? This is destructured. They are standalone things, then they are composed together to generate the games, and then we are just displaying this. Subscription here doesn't care how the games is generated. We haven't changed anything here since the beginning. We just displayed this, and this logic is there. Games doesn't care how subscribers react to it. It only knows how to generate games. Games also doesn't care how they are defined. Search released only on studio. Games only cares that they emit some filter values. Same can be said about this. And this is very composed. And when you look at this, it is, if you're used to this type of programming, it is very easy to understand what is happening here. You can just look at this and go down and everything looks clear. And you just understand how these things work. This is the end of series. I have talked about all the things about RxJS I wanted to discuss. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Click the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends.